Pleasure. Finally,
Welcome
in
ulit.
person.
Welcome ulit. Oo nga.
Bakit? Ngayon ka lang ba nag-in person?
In person, yes.
Hindi kayo kasi umiiwas na parati.
Zoom ako,
Pero
Zoom.
Tayo, medyo
pagka
too much.
nabalitaan na
Too much
nandiyan ka,
privilege.
talagang sinasadya ni Amin. Hindi. Pero kaya umiiwas dahil, Richard, I want to start with this. Nanggugulo ka na naman sa Twitter, may inaaway ka na ng mga Apple.
That's how I get my podcast invites. It's part of my modus operandi.
Hindi,
Pasensya.
but seriously, obviously, we're talking
Yeah.
about EDCA, we're talking about China as always. But we've been talking about that for a long time already. What's gotten people riled up at this point? Why suddenly, a more vociferous debate again on China?
Right. And so actually over the past week, ProLed came up with 5 different articles looking at different angles of pro-EDCA, anti-EDCA, where we're talking about it. For me, the important thing is to call out a lot of nonsense out there. I mean, let's be clear about the basic facts here.
Si Richard
Unang-una,
po yun, no?
the Armed Forces of the Philippines does not yet have even minimum defense credible posture. Not even that. So, yung mga nagsasabi na, let's rely on ourselves and come on, what world are you living in? Pangalawa, it's not the United States threatening war over Taiwan, it's not the United States bullying us. Of course, historically, the US has done many things that we can question, and blunders that they have had more recently in the Middle East. We can talk about it, no problem. But let's not forget, the threat to Taiwan is not from the US, nor from the Philippines, and also in the West Philippines. That's something that we have to keep in mind. And the other thing is this, I mean, as Winston Churchill put it, the only thing worse from having unreliable and bad allies is not having any allies in moments of hyper geopolitical uncertainty. So when you put all of those basic facts together, I think it's very easy to just parry a lot of nonsense that is coming out there, which I don't think is contributing to a healthy debate. Because what's happening right now is name-calling. Ito, pro-China. Ito, Amboy. That's not how we should do it. I think we have to have a realistic discussion about how much of EDCA is helpful and how much of EDCA is too provocative and
Itigil
excessive.
muna kita habang tatlong article pa lang yung binabanggit.
Yeah, no
Yung dalawang
problem.
article sa kana. Right, Mogs, I just
Ito
want to
na
start with...
editors.
ito na.
Yeah,
Mogs, I want to start with the first point because you are senior defense editor sa One News, di ba? So I want to start on the first point, di ba? Our defense posture, our capability, that's a very important premise in all of this. Nasaan ba talaga tayo?
Zero. Hindi ba
So,
negative?
tama siya.
Yeah, tama si...
Tama naman talaga.
Hindi, sa'yo zero eh. Sa kanya not enough.
Not, eh,
Mas matindi yun sa'yo.
We're still...
Minimum.
We're still trying to upgrade our capability. But to start with, we had zero. No? When the US left Subic and Clark in 1992, we were naked. We don't have radars, we don't have ships, we don't have fighters, everything. Wala. Nil. And Congress promised to enact a Modernization Act, giving 150 billion, but only 50 billion was given. And the real modernization started during Gloria. That's already 2000. And umabot na sa second modernization under Aquino. And we only started to acquire modest capability. Not even fighting capability.
Right.
Because the fighters we acquired are trainers.
Upgraded
They're
trainers.
upgraded trainers, yeah. And our frigates started arriving in 2018. Only 2. No? Ang China, ang dami. Yeah.
Right.
So, we have nothing, no? And when the US offered to help us modernize our bases, matagal pa yan. No? It is not instant or overnight, no? Like when they were granted access to Camilo Osillas Naval Base in Santa Ana and Lalo Air Base in Cagayan, ano meron doon? Nothing. Yung Lalo Base cannot operate at night. Walang runway lights yan. No? Walang facilities. Walang hangar. Walang everything. So talagang US will have to invest a lot to make that
$100
operational.
million, right? That's what,
Manny, yung EDCA access to Cagayan, yan ang pinaka-controversial dito sa mga bagong sites. Because they're saying, it's really just right across Taiwan.
Yes.
And it's provocative daw. It will draw us into conflict just in case China decides nga to get back Taiwan. That's the main argument for what you're
Yeah, I wanna know what Manny has
as
to say.
nonsense.
And you're speaking for the governor himself.
Okay.
di ba?
Yeah, okay.
Yes, that's the
I want to
governor's
see what Manny also
concern.
has to say about this. I mean, let's not also forget we have concerns in the Philippine Sea and Benham Rise issue.
Yes.
So it's not like Cagayan and Isabela are too far from that. You get what I'm saying? Fine, it's close to Taiwan, but it's also close to the Philippine Sea and Benham Rise, which, by the way, we have more than 300 nautical miles of exclusive zone to protect, and we have information back in the years. We have friends again sending submarines, doing shenanigans, dodgy stuff there. That's why
And
on their
naming
present.
the islands,
So what
right?
I'm saying is that people are thinking about the Taiwan angle. I'm also thinking about the Philippine Benham Rise angle, which we have to look at. But the other thing I want to say is this: everyone talks about. I mean, okay, everyone's saying daan na lang natin yan sa diplomasya. No, daan na lang natin yan sa ASEAN and all. It's not like we haven't tried any of these things. When it comes to Taiwan, when it comes to West Philippine Sea, diplomacy has been going on forever, right? I mean, and what does, for instance, diplomacy under President Duterte produce for us when it comes to making the situation better in
have
the
a
South China
bridge.
Sea? Na binild ng Chinese workers with the Chinese company with Chinese financing and like you know what I'm saying,
Ganda nung
right?
bridge, ang daming tourists.
Tapos yung isa pang bridge, parang ito yung 4 lanes, tapos 2 lanes. 2 lanes, 4 lanes, 2 lanes. Like, come on.
Richard, we get what you mean. We have Vietnam, we have West Philippine Sea, but the immediate concern right now nga is what's happening in Taiwan and the friction there.
Yes.
So the concern, for example, of Governor Mamba among other people is we become a magnet because any right-minded military strategist would say na first things I will hit will be the hubs or the logistics hubs.
Well, I mean, the thing is, we're too close to Taiwan not to be affected by a war regardless. And
Regardless.
number
Yes.
2, we're an ally of United States. So talaga ita-target tayo regardless. Baka ita-target pa yung Subic,
So
whatever.
inevitably,
So the
ikaw
idea
na.
of, mag-neutral na lang tayo, it doesn't work. You're a US ally. You think when China invades Taiwan, they're gonna say, no, Philippines will be
Pero yun yung tinatanong
wala
kapon,
tayo nun
Ikaw, Manny.
Manny, yun yung tanong ko parang, pinaghihiwalay, if you were Beijing, magkahiwalay pa ba yung calculation mo sa Taiwan
No.
at saka sa Manila?
No. Pero look at the recent drills around Taiwan, yung 3-day drills nung China. I think the Philippines was not even in their consideration, no? Because this aircraft carrier, yung Shandong, was near Okinawa, no? The forces of China are in eastern part of Taiwan. So, yung mga fighters nila in J-21 were taking off and landing sa carrier which is east of Taiwan and closer to Japan. Siguro they are trying to prevent
Baka
an
naman,
intervention from somewhere, not from the Philippines.
Pero
no?
baka naman kasi Okinawa is much better developed in terms of military and logistics
Yes.
capability than the Philippines. So in the immediate term, baka we're not in the radar yet, but in the medium to
No,
long
we
term.
have to look at it in an integrated fashion. Kaya sabi ko, one of the trilaterals we have to talk about is what I call JAFUS, Japan, Philippine, US. Because if US wants to protect Taiwan, you have to have the northern tier and southern tier. Okinawa and Santo Ryukyu islands are very close, around 100 nautical miles. Mavulis and Fuga are also more or less that
Same.
close, pero hindi sinama sa EDCA so far as I understand. Now, there's debate about they're better operational experts than me. They're saying, wait, it's not good enough to even for the Americans to push for it. But for me, it would have been really provocative if there is an indication or whiff that Americans will also have access to the Mavulis and Fuga. Why is this important? Because I completely agree with Manny that the Japanese part, the Eastern Command of China does. But there were 2 major war games that was conducted in August last year. One by Center for New American Security, another one by the Center for Strategic International Studies. All of those simulations indicated that if a kinetic all-out war happens, the soft underbelly of Taiwan is actually its south. Because Taiwan has good defensive perimeters towards the
Up
north.
north, yeah.
Kasi they have been preparing for that. This is, by the way, 4th Taiwan Strait crisis we're talking about. Ang mahina sila is south.
The Basque
Kaya nga-
Channel.
Exactly. Kaya nga biglang napaworry ang Amerika. Wait lang, sinong alay natin dyan? Baka kailangan nila ng tulong. So this is all about what you call integrated collective deterrence. Because Japan will do its own part, because Japan cannot ignore what's happened. That's what late Abe said. an emergency in Taiwan is an emergency for Japan, precisely because geography, history, and all. But if you don't take care of the Philippine part, then may exposure din doon. So the US is trying to work trilaterally with Japan and Philippines to protect that, and then hoping under AUKUS, the Australians and UK and others will be involved. So if you're China, you're looking at all of these elements together. And to think that in the Philippines, we suddenly can say, while nagpapatayan ng mga Amerikano, Chinese, we're neutral. You cannot do that. Allies cannot be neutral. That's what President Marcos is saying. Unahan na natin, mag-prepare na tayo, mag-deter na tayo. What I am not 100% sold on is President Marcos Jr.'s claim that will not allow any of these bases to be used for any...
Offensive.
No! Once it's war, it's war. Wala na yung mga, pare, wag naman sana. So I think the President has to be also honest that we are being exposed.
Yeah,
But better to be prepared and to deter it than nakatunga ka lang dyan at hintayin mo yung krisis na napupunta sa'yo.
Manny, when it comes to offensive operations, ano ba yung description ng offensive?
Well, if you want an offensive operation coming from the Philippines, you should be basing bombers in Clark.
Okay.
And you will have
Right.
offensive missiles, rockets, deployed in the Philippines.
But you can use that for defense as well, di ba?
Yes,
Di ba yung
but-
offensive only if you fire the first shot?
Yes, but
That's an
if
offense.
you want a retaliation, you need nuclear submarine somewhere in the Philippines.
Eh, hindi naman natin alam kung nandyan, di ba?
Ayan, oh. So, that's
Di
the problem.
naman tayo nagtatanong eh.
They don't ask, don't tell ba?
Ang US, United, confirm and deny eh.
Eh,
Oo.
di ba pati China nga, there were reports that there were Chinese submarines
Submarines, yeah.
in Subic.
So, yeah.
Oh, kaya nga,
Let's just make
kaya
that
nga
clear,
nasa
di ba?
balabak yung kano eh.
Oh,
Hindi,
yeah.
kaya nga, but so let's just make that clear.
Correct.
We assume, di ba? We assume that meron na dyan. Nandyan na lahat. Both
Meron.
on the US side and on Chinese side.
Yeah, that's why under the new EDCA, there is a base in Balabac guarding the southern route, no? And there's one in Cagayan guarding the Basi Channel, Balintang Channel. Ang binabantayan niyan yung ano eh, diyan dumadaan yung aircraft carrier saka yung submarine ng China eh.
But how much can OCS do? I mean, I've seen it on Google Earth. Sa Santa
Nothing.
Ana, parang
Nothing.
airstrip lang ata yan. Tsaka,
Oo, nothing. So,
Pala
At
eh.
this point.
At this
kaya
point.
Kaya nga i-develop siya. eh.
So,
Diba?
I think the vision there is build it as a mini Subic.
Right.
Kasi may airstrip, tsaka may naval base.
yeah.
Pero, yung pier, dapat lakihan pa yun.
Yeah, but also,
Yes.
as a mini Subic, the premise there should be that it would be able to accommodate
Deep harbor.
Exactly.
Deep water vessels. Ibig sabihin, the harbor or no, the bottom really has to be deep.
I think
Otherwise, you just have small vessels.
I think in Camilo Ocias, it's also deeper because it's in the Balintang to Basi Channel. Eh.
But I just want to clarify that when you say mini Subic, you're literally just saying, you know, it's a little, it's a smaller portion of land. But in terms of capacity, it will essentially be the same.
Well, there are a lot of opportunities and capabilities that will be done in Camilo Ocias kasi nating pa yan eh. So, ang dami pang development na kailangan dyan, no? Unlike Subic na nando na. And before, there was a plan to develop Palawan, yung Oyster Bay, into a mini Subic. Ang problema, mababaw. Tsaka yung
Correct.
pagpasok
Laki
mo,
yun.
yung mouth nung bay,
Sa Bautista.
ang laki ng bato!
Snorkeling area.
Oo,
yun
so
eh.
hindi makadaan yung mga destroyer doon. So itong Camilo Ocias, open yan, open sea.
Right.
So tingin ko mas perfect yung Camilo Ocias.
Dun sa
Ngayon,
topography.
nangako ang US, initial $100 million for infrastructure for development.
Wala
Kasya
pa.
na ba yun?
Wala pa yun.
Liit-liit lang.
Wala
yun,
pa
di ba?
kasi yung 100 million na pinangako ng US is for the 5 existing bases.
Yes.
So
And existing.
existing.
Designated.
So wala pang pera dun sa
Additional.
The new
4. We don't know how much but I think they will spend a lot, no? Kasi talagang malaking development
Billion yan eh. Billion
Yes.
yan eh. Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you look at the EDCA sites, the new and the old, and related to what's happening in Taiwan, may connection ba yan ngayon? Kasi parang as it is right now, as they are right now, they're basically undeveloped or underdeveloped yung mga sites na to. So when we express concern about the EDCA sites, should it be with regard to what's happening now in Taiwan? Like you said, this is the fourth crisis already
Taiwan
with
crisis,
Taiwan.
yeah.
Or are we looking forward na lang talaga? Because hindi naman naabot kung ano mang gagawin yan.
Any approach has to be multi-layered. I'm sure there are like immediate counter, intervention options for the United States. I'm sure the Japanese are already preparing for that. At the same time, you also play the long game because a crisis could come in 2024 if Taiwan elects someone super
Maybe a
pro-independence,
fifth Taiwan or sixth
or it
Taiwan,
might come in 2027 when China has, or it could come 2035. So you get what I'm saying. So there are 2 or 3 timelines we're looking at, and for each of those timelines, there's certain operational readiness that you have to have. Your hoping is that while you're ready for the short term or short sharp war, you're also preparing for the
protracted ka.
big protracted Third World War situation. So this is actually not
Yeah,
mutually
and let's say,
exclusive. It all has moved together.
beyond protracted with the dynamics between Taiwan and China. I mean, save for the extreme scenario of unification,
Right.
diba? The bottom line is it will always be there. It will never actually disappear, diba? For as long as Taiwan considers itself and takes the posture of an independent state, diba? That it's beyond protracted. Permanent na yang ano na yan, and our calculations will also have to be permanent in that regard.
What I always say is this: everyone talks about option 1 or 10. 1 is peace, 10 is total war. But from 1 to 10, there's so many steps,
There's a spectrum.
so many ugly things that could happen. Cyber warfare, critical infrastructure of the Philippines could be targeted. Kaya parati ko sinasabi, the president has to be honest and come out. We're not provoking, but we also have to be prepared for potential retaliations and a whole range of 50 shades of risks. And that's why you need a whole of nation response to this, no? Hindi pwede yung yung military lang nag-uusap dyan na secret. We have to be honest because at some point, if God forbid, there are tensions, there are run-ups, or China wants to send a signal, they could target our civilian infrastructure if they want. I'm not saying they're going to do that. So we have to already make countermeasures on that front. Now, I am not privy to what's going on, but I hope President Marcos got sufficient reassurances from our top allies, especially the Americans, that they're going to help us to prepare for the full range of risks that we're going to face here, short of total
Speaking
war.
of the non-traditional warfare that you
Liquid
alluded
warfare,
to,
hybrid
diba?
warfare, yeah.
And electronic, di ba? Parang electronic, digital warfare, and so on. What about Taiwan? What do we get from Taiwan in terms of assurance? Taiwan is also, there's a global interest here in Taiwan, being the #1 producer of semiconductors, being so integral to chips worldwide. All countries essentially have an interest in what happens to
And
Taiwan.
200,000 Filipino, if doubles,
Diba?
they're more than 200,000.
Yeah, so on the electronic digital front, we're talking about what assurance can we get from the United States. I want to know also, what are we getting from Taiwan? Are we having that conversation with them to cover the digital front as well?
My problem, I mean, I've been based in Taiwan and I talked to multiple presidents, mind you, Tsai Ing-wen, etc. My sense in my conversation with Taiwanese counterparts is there's kind of an awkward wall between the two of us because we have a one China
Yes.
policy. Then we had Duterte, who's super Beijing one China policy, right? So, and then under Aquino, we're supposed to have a good relationship, and yet many bad things happen, including
Yeah,
yung
yung
Coast
Pinatay.
Guard
Coast Guard,
incident.
yeah.
And then the weird thing, and this is where I'm not very confident with Taiwan, is silang nag-invento ng 9-dash line na yan.
Yes.
It actually was 10-dash
They
line,
started it,
right?
actually.
So actually sila yung pasimuno. So sometimes it's weird. Taiwan talks about rule of law, but their claims are a joke, right? Which is based on, because I worked there. So I said, you're not going to help getting sympathy when you're adopting exactly the same aggression. In fact, you invented it. So this is why there's an awkward wall, a kind of a gauzy hidden wall between the two of us. But at some point, we have to start talking to each other, whether directly or via the Japanese and Americans who have really direct security engagements with them.
So we're not? I mean, directly?
I'm sure there is,
Directly,
but I
yeah,
don't think
not
it's anywhere close to where it should be. When you have officials there asking me what's going on in my country, probably they don't have as much access.
Pero what's the current position of Taiwan on our arbitral case?
They're not supporting it because they stand with their 9-dash line. And they believe Ito Aba is a
Yes.
full-fledged island that can support life on its own. Therefore, it can project 200 nautical miles exclusive economic zone. I had a weird conversation with President Ma, their former president, who supposedly has a PhD in UNCLOS, whatever, was in Harvard, and he was claiming that their EEZ reaches into our EEZ
Of course.
from.
So they're more
What's
Yes.
going on here? This is crazy.
they're more expansion.
Hindi kasi tayo talaga, we have
They're more expansionist than
no, we have a common EEC kasi.
Yeah,
But the difference is they are not building artificial islands.
Just
They're not
because they're small and not that
Yes.
big, right? But
Uh-huh.
parang, the fact that they're claiming a little bit dodgy stuff, like it made me feel uncomfortable. So if I, as an academic, someone very open, journalist is not comfortable, I suppose things are kind of weird also when they deal with our official. So I think this is where US and Japan has to come in and
Yes.
say like, okay, you guys kind of have an awkward stance. You guys have your arbitration case.
na lang muna.
But let's do something about it. And my sense is, by the way, this week also is going to be the Trilateral National Security Advisors meeting from what I understand. Jake Sullivan is going to likely meet
Anyo.
Secretary Anyo and the Japanese counterpart, right? So I think the Taiwan issue, like, hey guys, I think we need to talk to Taiwan
Yes.
too, because Taiwan has an agency. You see, a war could also be avoided if Taiwan also plays its cards well. I'm not doing victim blaming. I'm just saying, let's not talk about Taiwan as if nakatunganga lang sila doon. Meron silang pwedeng gawin dito,
sige.
pero kailangan natin silang kausapin.
Okay, pause muna tayo. We have to take a quick break. Stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back.
We're talking about Taiwan, China, the US, and the Philippines. Still with us, geopolitical analyst Richard Heydarian and One News security and defense editor Manny Mogato. Pagbigyan naman natin yung mga nagpo-protesta led by the governor of Cagayan.
Mamba,
Sabi
Mamba.
niya, his biggest concern is economic. No? He is trying to build economic ties, trade ties, stronger ties with China, and here we are building facilities for U.S. access.
This is why I'm
So-
worried about federalism. One reason I'm worried about federalism is that you're going to have more of this, because in a federalist situation, central government is going to be very weak. Enforcement of major national security considerations are going to be very weak. You're going to give a lot of prerogative to some governors. I don't know about this governor, but some of the governors, is it him, who are openly pro-Beijing, right? So this is my thing. I'm all for autonomy. I'm all for multi-stakeholder consultation, etc. But there are times whereby you cannot allow people who are just thinking about their own, their
Their own
own.
jurisdiction. But
How
national
can I put it in a
defense,
politically correct way,
Pero,
right? More parochial
but national
interests
defense
above
still,
the national
still
security.
should
national.
be within the ambit of the national government. I mean,
And
in all-
acknowledged naman ni Governor Camba na foreign affairs and
It's within the
national
ambit,
defense
exactly.
is national. So tatanong ko lang, do you expect China to use economic pressure again on us because of
Do you
what's happening?
expect to, or they have already?
Hindi pa naman, no.
Like 2012.
I don't think they're
Like
doing
2012.
Exactly, we
They
had the
did
banana
before.
durian situation. No, I think it's pretty well established that China will always look at a whole range of options to induce us towards a certain behavior. If
But,
not
but
the
you
national
don't
government,
think
the
they
local
will
government.
try to win hearts and minds?
So in
seeing what's
2019,
happening,
the reason
right?
why I'm familiar with the FOGA and all of those issues, because in 2019, I remember I wrote an article about plans by certain Chinese companies to build tourist resort and
Yes.
recreational
Ecotourism.
facilities.
Oo nga, yun na nga.
And then that's where it's like, oh, something interesting is going on. I actually call that economic cabbage strategy. The idea is that, well, if you cannot prevent the national government from building strong facilities with Americans
Yeah.
or something like that, you know what? Build ecotourist sites or hotels
No,
next to the facilities
Yeah, but it's a
and all of
serious
that,
point, di ba?
right?
I mean, Manny, speaking of Subic and Clark, di ba? And for that matter, John Hay and what other pages we have there. But I mean, what are the other calculations here of local governments when they look at this and when they essentially understand that actually hindi ko naman kulto eh. Di ba? Pwede ako mag-ingay, pero
Well, merong something hindi maganda, no? Kasi the civilian government, of course, they're thinking of economic considerations, no? It's developing their own provinces, like Governor Mamba. He has been attracting not only Chinese but South Korean
Yes.
investors, no?
Ah.
Kaya nga nagawa yung Lalo Airport eh. Kasi to bring them back, no?
Yes.
To his province. Kaya lang nangyari puro pogo
Oh, yun na nga.
and black sand mining.
yeah.
So, ano yung klaseng development na mangyayari dyan?
Exactly.
But lack of imagination is one thing. Yeah, but the reality is, there's also the reality that an infusion is an infusion. That's something that you're gonna have infrastructure there. You're going to have some things develop. There is going to be
But that's
money.
my point. What if this is not an innocently bad investment? It's a corrosive capital, right? It's a certain investment with certain geopolitical implications for how the political economy and decision making runs in certain. I'm not saying that's what's happening, but that's something we have to watch out for. I mean, like now in the literature, everyone talks about sharp power. What is sharp power? When authoritarian regimes use your own media, use your own openness, use investments and other kind of means to undermine democracies from within when it comes to national security. Not to mention, I mean, Taiwan has been dealing with us for a very long time. You know, literally one of the biggest parties in Taiwan was suspected to be essentially a lobbying group for another country, right? Influencers, people in the media. So we have to be serious about it. We're not trying to tag anyone or something like if there's red tagging, or I don't know whatever. We're not doing that, but we're saying let's be realistic. We are in the midst of a new Cold War. And in the midst of a new Cold War, things happen. So you have to be prepared for it accordingly. Now, my sense also is when Senator Amy Marcos came out very strongly against EDCA, almost, I won't say berating, but you know, she really, I think that created a permission structure. I know there's like, baka ano lang yan, good cop, bad cop lang yan. Regardless, the effect is that you create a permission structure whereby former President Duterte feels confident to come out, Governor of Cagayan feels confident to come out, even Governor of Isabela, and then suddenly you have this weird combination of people from far left saying exactly the same thing as Rodrigo Duterte. It's like, or Amy Marcos for that matter. It's like, is that a horseshoes situation? What's going on there? So I think this small plurality or minority of people who are resisting it are not powerful now yet. But let's say in 2 years' time, tensions go high. China imposes a semi-siege on Taiwan. There's some ripple effect on the Philippines. What do you think these people are gonna do? Let's say, see, etong EDCA, pinahamak lang tayo nito ni Junior eh. Dapat di tayo sumali dyan. You get what I'm saying? We have to look 2-3 steps from now because the EDCA deal is done.
But I mean,
It's gonna
taking it on
happen.
the other side, is there any scenario na hindi tayo damay dyan? I mean, it's
Wala.
not as if EDCA is yan, di ba? Because the argument there is that EDCA ang nagpasimuno tayo dyan. Dahil dyan, napilitan tayo. Yan na, pero you take an arm, they'll take a leg and the whole body. But
Right.
is there actually a scenario here, with or without EDCA, na hindi tayo damay dito?
Talagang damay tayo. Kasi the proximity of the Philippines to Taiwan. Talagang damay ka na eh.
And we
With
have
or
a
without
mutual
MDT, EDCA, whatever, wala.
Without MDT,
Talagang tatamaan tayo. Katabi natin eh. No? Kasi yung...
Tsaka sa atin yung vulnerability, as you were saying kanina.
Look at the 3-day training, drills ng China. Nag-react yung Japan, no? They scrambled jets.
Yeah.
Kasi if China will have a blockade, no? An air and sea blockade in Taiwan, dama yung Japan. Tayo pa, ang lapit-lapit natin sa Taiwan. So, damay rin tayo.
Is that what it comes to? Iniisip ko kasi yung eksena na yun eh. Di ba? May ginawa ang China, Japan scrambles jets. How soon will that scenario play out from
Philippines.
here?
Meron ba tayong jet?
We will scramble eggs.
Hindi, not ours. Not ours.
Private
Pero sabihin
jets.
pagka
Mga billionaires natin dyan, baka mag-private jets sila dyan.
Mag-aalis
Pero nga, to that point nga dami nga ba tayo regardless of whether we had EDCA or not to begin with?
Yeah, damay tayo.
So,
Unless we
inevitable talaga
end the
yun.
Mutual Defense Treaty and declare ourselves a province of China. Di ba? Yun yun.
So that's your
Any attack, for
That's
example,
it.
of the US based on the Pacific.
so your point is anybody attacking even that premise, yun yung inaan mong
Damay talaga
Hindi
tayo.
mo
It's
na
a
kaya.
question of how prepared are we gonna be and how much we wanna deter it effectively. Right? Yun yung tanong eh. Oh.
Tsaka pag may amphibious attack, yung China sa southern Taiwan, dadaan ng base channel yan.
Yes.
Dadaan sa atin yan.
Talagang,
Talagang maski may EDCA, wala, may MDT, wala, damay tayo dyan.
It's a tyranny of
So
geography.
the question is, in that scenario, the question is either we confront that on our own, quote unquote, or meron tayong kasama.
Ayan.
Or,
Oo.
naka-ano lang tayo dyan, passive spectator/victim. Because we can say, oh, we don't want to cooperate with America at all, but we're still an American ally, so matatarget din tayo, but we're totally unprepared, we have nothing to deter. You get what I'm saying? So, all I'm saying is that there are no good options. The question is, what is the least bad option, right?
Oh,
Because
sige.
obviously there's risk regardless. With EDCA,
Pero
without
balikan ko yan.
EDCA.
So even if we say, and assuming we even attempt it, even if we say na we're not going to get involved in this, inevitably babagsak din sa atin.
In a way, but
Sa mainland.
but this is where I make an argument that I feel many are not agreeing. Remember, I said a few months ago, pwede pa natin i-dribble yan. Like for instance, the Balikatan was relocated from Ilocos to Zambales, for instance. The craziest war games could be put a little bit away from Taiwan. That's something interesting to consider. Maybe we can do more of that in the future if China also gives us something interesting. You get what I'm saying? So for me, is that I don't think we're 100% in yet. I don't think all the chips are on the table yet. I think it's 60-70%. A lot is in, but I think there's still some room to play around it. If you know better than me, please tell me. My also understanding is that we're still negotiating. This is a statement from Pentagon. Number of American troops that will have access to these bases. Are we going to spend 1 billion, make them Subic, mini Subic, semi Subic? What I'm saying is, we have still options, right? I don't think we have fully aligned with the US yet. I think we can still hedge. I know many are still telling Richard the boat has sailed or the genie is out of the bottle, but I'm not 100%
But
sold
Manny,
on that
let me
yet.
rephrase that. And to you
Manny,
also.
maybe you know
Have
better
we
than me
not-
on this,
no,
but that's my sense.
Have we not realigned yet? Have we not aligned yet? Or itong mga sinasabi mong remaining questions, remaining details, is this just a matter of us trying to keep our negotiating position and get as much as we could
We
from
have
Washington?
realigned long time ago.
Oh, exactly.
Even during
Diba?
Duterte's time.
So details na lang to, di ba? Parang
Military
we're
has
just
been with
trying
the
to...
Americans.
O sige, what are the reasonable demands from us? Dito
Kahit hindi
dito
reasonable,
sa-
demands muna. Ano yung
Siyempre,
demands
hindi,
natin?
reasonable.
What can we get?
We should get equipment.
Ayan, yan ang gusto
Okay.
kong discussion.
Yeah.
Yan,
Okay.
Let's go
We
there.
should get equipment, modernize our bases.
Baka kaparahin stranded dun sa Iungin hindi ganon
Hindi. Oh.
Ah,
We should
Sierra
get
Madre.
radars,
okay.
armed drones,
Okay.
HIMARS,
Okay.
fighters.
Sorry.
F-16V.
What are HIMARS? Sorry.
HIMARS yung high mobility artillery
Artillery.
system.
Yes.
Okay.
Yung
Ito yung ginamit sa Ukraine.
Okay.
Yes. Kailangan ba natin ng
Kailangan natin
submarine?
yan kasi these are short to ship.
Do we need submarines?
We need,
Submarines. Do we need?
but
Kailangan
afford.
wala namang bibigay
Medyo
ng
mahal
conventional
yun.
submarine ng US eh. Ang meron sila, nuclear submarine eh. Hindi natin
okay.
kaya yun. Yung Australia nga, mahal-mahal.
Pero Mogs,
yung-
I mean, these are all nice shopping lists, but these all need intensive training and
Yes.
a lot
Yes.
of time and
Especially
preparation
some.
and logistics as
But
well.
the package was
You're not
approved.
Lazada off the shelf na parang, I want 3 of that and deliver by tomorrow.
No, but the package was approved 2 years ago. The $2 billion package that included, the Harpoon missile systems, F-16, hopefully
Yes,
F-15 fighters.
Congress
Yes, sir.
already approved.
I-
Ang perang naging problema. So my
Yeah.
point is, maybe the US wants to give us good discount and good terms of payment, right? I mean, might as well make this count, right? If you're 70% in, make sure it kind of
Yes,
counts
sir.
for the
But
Philippines.
I understand,
yeah.
sir. But what I'm saying is that whatever we do today, even if it started 2 years ago, if they start arriving today, you can't operate it yet. You need to send pilots to the
it's
US
a
for
5
training.
to 10 years
Mabilis
at
naman
the
Hindi, mabilis
shortest.
lang yung
Mabilis lang,
F-16 kasi
May FA-50 training na
Oo,
tayo.
meron
Ah,
tayong
yung lead
F-15.
trainer.
Oo. Kasi yung lead-in trainer natin,
Yeah,
pang
yeah.
F-16 na yun eh.
Yeah, but what the logistics tail? These are massive logistics tails that you're looking at. The Black Hawk alone, magkano yung cost per hour ng Black Hawk? And
Na-crash
so on
pa
and
yung
on.
isa,
And
diba?
and what about something like a multi-role fighter? Diba? That's a
Yung
massive.
package ng US includes after-sales, training, maintenance. No? That would cost us $2.4 billion.
Per
Yung the whole
The
package.
total package.
The whole package.
Yeah.
oo.
Para just mga 600.
Yeah, it was approved 2 years ago by
2 years ago,
US
2020,
Congress.
yeah.
Ang problema, ang pera natin, 1.2
by US
lang.
Congress. Akala ko ba by Philippine Congress may pera
Hindi,
na.
kasi
Iba yun.
before US can export that,
Yeah.
they need US Congress.
Yes,
no?
yes.
But the Philippines only has
Kalate lang.
1.4.
Yeah.
Parang,
1.2
ito lang po yung
billion.
dala kong pera eh.
Oo. Kaya yung ating fighter is only good for Gripen. No, yung Swedish
Sabi.
Gripen. Eh,
Pangit yun eh.
Pangit yun.
No offense to our Swedish friends. Hindi.
kaya wala na gumagamit nun.
Oh bro, I mean, 5th generation fighter
They
in
have
China,
better
eh.
exports.
No offense. I mean, good luck with that.
Si Secretary Albert De Rosario has a good idea. No?
Ah.
Instead of buying this, why don't we lease?
Well, lease.
Oo.
That was the
Mas
initial
mura.
EDCA plan, yeah. Pero
Mas mura
nag-no si
yun.
Obama doon eh. Natakot si Obama na gagamitin na natin yung mga American troops. Tapos, yung kami tapos madamay sila. Which is the beginning of the Kissinger Doctrine in the 1970s, right? The US has to be categorically neutral because gagamitin tayo ng mga Pilipino. Kasi we were aggressive. Let's be honest. In the 1970s, we were the kind of the aggressive bully guys. We built the first modern airstrip. Di ba? Paano ni Marcos Sr.
Pag-asa
yan?
Island.
Exactly. So, kaya nga yung US natakot. Ito mga Pilipino, madamay tayo. That's why Obama said no. But I'm saying since Trump 2018, none of us are probably fan of him, but since 2018, I think, things have been moving in a direction that
Things have
allows
changed.
us to get more out of this alliance. So, yung mga nagsasabi dyan, 100 years na tayo ng alay ng Amerika, bakit ganitong sandatan lakas natin? Well, first of all, a lot has been changing over the past 5-6 years, just in case you missed the news. And second, kasalanan din natin, maybe, na hindi natin na-debate dahil daming corruption, daming incompetence,
a
daming
lot has
trapo.
changed on the side of Washington. I said when Obama announced the pivot to Asia, we really didn't know what that was, except for those two words. Nobody felt it. Nobody knew what he meant by it. And it fell flat. Diba? A lot has changed in Washington, as you said. What has changed with us? Really, fundamentally, we said, credit to him, President Duterte allowed a rebalancing. That was an extreme way of expressing the renegotiate and to. Are we still on that balance, or have we actually at this point? Can you call it at this point? Actually, no. We're managing the diplomacy side, but we have actually let's call a spade a spade. We have actually shifted back to the United States.
No, I think if you look at more closely, during Duterte, the perception was that we are going to China, we're veering towards China. But if you look closely, DFA and the military
that's true.
stayed closely with the US. So, the only difference is that maybe Marcos is more chami-chami to the US. So, there was a change in perception. Nakakala natin, lumapit tayo sa US. Pero actually, it's not the same. And I think Bongbong is trying now to balance between US and China. Because ayaw din niyang ma-alienate yung China eh.
What I think has changed in the Philippines, though, and I mean, this is what I get from interaction with people like Ambassador Romualdez, for instance, who's our ambassador to the US, is the recognition that hindi tayo pwede umasa sa US lang to check China. We have to consciously diversify our options for counterbalancing. That's why Japan is very much there. That's why Australia is very much. That's why EU is there. UK is there. India, by the way, which gave us, the BrahMos missile system, which actually has Russian weapon derivative, which puts us in a position to get hypersonic. So, maybe I'm a little bit more cautiously optimistic that we have slightly matured over time. It's not the simplistic US ba tayo or China tayo. And for all the faults of President Duterte, I think he forced us to have some deep thinking about ano bang ambag itong alliance natin with the United States. And I can tell you guys, from my own personal experience, I feel the Americans take us more seriously nowadays. I remember back in the day, Philippines, even na yan. But now it feels different. So I think the challenge for Marcos is to make the most out of this strategic sweet spot we find ourselves.
Exactly. I want to ask about the sweet spot, especially given this, multilateral framework, the Indo-Pacific framework.
Right.
Speaking of the interests of India, speaking of the interests of Australia,
Correct.
Diba? It's clear why they would be all in on this, because they're all in on this Indo-Pacific framing.
Correct.
How do we now maximize what is our positioning now, given the vitality of Taiwan and given our vitality vis-a-vis that?
In South China
How
Sea
do we now
also,
position in this Indo-Pacific framework?
My sense is, first of all, we have to be also very strong on the non-military aspect of strategic partnership. If you look at the 2+2 statement that came out, there was a lot of emphasis on US aid, on environment, on development. Bakit mahalaga yan? Because China's biggest leverage over all of us is their resources, economic resources, trade. US has nothing to offer, but Japan has something to offer. They're at the center of the CPTPP. Japan is part of also the RCEP. Australia is also part of the RCEP. The Europeans have the biggest collective economy on earth. They can offer something. India, by the way, is the other giant. Literally, the other elephant in the room is India. They're going to be the second biggest economy within few decades, if not earlier. So I think this is the time where we should go beyond this binary US versus China, because it was never US versus China. It was US plus so many other rising and existing power who are not very comfortable all about where China, because who are China's allies? North Korea, Pakistan? I'm not sure about that.
Oh, what about ASEAN?
Our strategy should be really working with all of them. As far as ASEAN is concerned, I'll be brutally honest. ASEAN 10 as an organization is a small and medium enterprise with no human rights charter. There's not much they can do.
Yes.
But ASEAN minilateralism, meaning directly work with Vietnamese, directly work with Indonesians and Malaysians, with Singaporeans, I think that can produce more. And if you're China, okay, I can lean on Cambodia and Laos and
Yes.
those, and ASEAN cannot come with the statements. But if Indonesia and Philippines, Malaysia together, we make some moves, that will get the attention of the Chinese. That's why I always said the best way to save ASEAN is through ASEAN minilateralism. They're not mutually exclusive. Because ASEAN 10 doesn't work. In fact, ASEAN doesn't even understand basic terms. Consensus comes from the word muafarat. And if you're familiar with the word Arabic, muafarat is consensus in the sense that we have to come up with more or less common understanding. ASEAN operates on unanimity, which is a completely different issue. So one country says no, nothing happens. So huwag na tayo umasa sa ASEAN. Hopeless case na yan eh. Yung code of conduct negotiate, wala mapunta na. It's a joke thing. Let's do code of conduct among ourselves. Let's do maritime delimitation among ourselves. Let's do minilateral with Singapore. Ang term ko dyan, squad, right? Singapore, ASEAN plus squad countries. Let's work together. Let's think beyond just US and China. For me, this is our biggest problem in the Philippines. We think there are only 2 elephants and the rest are grass. No, I think that metaphor is problematic because you have zebras, you have lions, you have hyenas, you have cheetahs. It's a zoo out there. So let's deal with all of these other animals there and work it together. Because at the end of the day, if we only think about US and China, we feel hopeless. We feel we're too small. But if we think, what about
and to
Australia?
that point,
What
I
about
mean,
Japan?
not just geographically. When you only think of US and China, but you're also saying when you only think in terms of the military and security
Exactly.
situation, we have to also consider the economic factors here, the trade, the positioning, and so on.
Critical infrastructure. So one good example is what
And
happened
soft power
in
also.
Subic, diba? Dun sa Hanjin, right? Where there were fears that some Chinese state-owned companies will come in and weaponize
Buy it
an
out.
investment. What happened? Japan, Australia, US came together, counterbid, boom, problem solved. I think that's a very good model. Not only in the Philippines. When I go abroad, I say that should be a model for the entire Indo-Pacific. That's how you just don't go and say death trap, China is evil, etc. People are gonna laugh at you. What do you have to offer us? Anong ambag na tong counter
Otherwise,
proposal
bebenta
nyo?
namin sa China.
Ano mangyayari?
Di ba?
Kasi
Yun lang.
kailangan
Otherwise,
natin
bebenta
mag-develop eh. Practical lang. Kaya naintindihan ko si Governor Mamba eh, di ba? So,
ganun pala,
counter-offer kayo
naintindihan
eh.
mo pala.
Huwag kayo mag-bash. Mag-offer kayo sa Cagayan ng magandang investment. Hindi lang yung mga pogo, yung mga gano'n. Matinong investment concept.
Oo,
Let me
Cagayan
squeeze in
can
one
invite investments from other
Australia,
countries.
Japan,
diba?
US, exactly.
Well, let me squeeze in one more. You made a strong point kanina about President Marcos needing to make an honest declaration
Let's be
with real clarity as far as
Yeah.
EDCA's
There's
implications are
risk,
concerned.
yeah.
But what should he say? In
Man,
detail,
ikaw.
what should he say and how should he say to the public?
Well, it should be forthright, no?
Yeah.
Dapat sabihin niya ano talaga yung mangyayari, no? Hindi sinasabi niya na this
Hindi din naman niya alam kung ano mangyayari kasi.
Easy.
Marcos administration.
May question yun.
No, it's
May
very
question yan, di ba? Question yan.
unpredictable.
Oh, di ba?
Question yan, di ba? Question.
No, everything is unpredictable, di ba?
Well,
It's a
she was
volatile
asking a question,
situation.
yeah.
May diba sa dulo. May diba sa dulo.
Yeah.
Di ba? It's a volatile situation and no one can really predict what's going to happen.
Right.
Yeah, ang daming uncertainty, no? We don't know if China will really invade
Grab Taiwan.
no?
Yes.
Gusto lang nila pero we don't know if they have the stomach to do it, di ba? Kasi ayaw naman siguro masira yung Taiwan. Di ba?
Yes.
Kawawa rin ang
bansa nila
China.
yun eh.
Exactly,
Oo.
yeah.
They are also Chinese, di ba?
Exactly.
So I don't know, baka ano lang to eh, nababluff lang, no? And for
And
us,
they don't have the experience of
wala silang experience.
amphibious invasion. Or,
yeah, so
or
ang
even
dapat
airborne
for
invasion.
us is that we should exploit yung nangyayaring sitwasyon ngayon. Now, we generate a lot of support from other countries and then take advantage of it, no? Develop, especially in EDCA sites, in Cagayan, in Isabela. These are good opportunities for the U.S. to make bigger and better roads, bridges, papunta rin sa Ocampo.
Yeah. But they will still remain engines of potential.
Yan, no? Kasi, alam mo ba sa Samar, you know, in Giwan, there is an old airstrip na ginamit ng World War II. And then,
Right.
the US built a 6-lane highway going there. Anong meron doon? Wala. Airport na hindi ginagamit.
Nung bumagyo nung kay Yolanda, ginamit nila yun.
Oo nga. Pero etong Cagayan and Isabela, na gagamitin nila, so they will build better roads.
Yeah.
No?
Oh, tsaka eventually lahat yan
Job generating.
lahat yan position niya for the new international airport of the Philippines.
Ayan. Oo.
Sana! Kahit Chinese ko mo, kasi
Sige.
mabilis na
Bakit?
pagkatapos.